Okay, so good evening everyone, we're Sisyphus. My name is Ronan, this is Feargal, Manon and Cathal. So the scope of our project was basically we wanted to create awareness or increase awareness about bio-pesticides as an alternative or as a solution to the use of chemical pesticides. So as we all know, the global population is increasing exponentially. And it's going to lead to a food crisis very, very shortly. But the problem about this is we're going to have less and less space and we're going to have to grow more and more crops. And currently, insects and other pests take 15% of our crops. So how can we deal with that? Like, how do we halt the advance of insects and how do we halt the advance of pests as they pertain to growing crops? The current solution to this is the use of chemical pesticides, and it always has been the use of chemical pesticides since the agricultural revolution came about. But the problem with this is chemical pesticides in their nature, they're quite a short-term solution to a very long-term problem. But what I mean by this is there's a huge amount of concerns and risks with the use of chemical pesticides. I'm just going to go into some of these now before we go on to why we should be using biopesticides. So the first of which is genetic resistance. Over the years, as we've strived to become more and more efficient in how we grow crops and how we farm, we've been using more and more chemical pesticides. But the problem with this is chemical pesticides are, by their nature, inert. Whereas the pests they're working on are living organisms. They have a way of evolving. They have a way of adapting to their environment. With this comes genetic resistance, very similar to antibiotic resistance in medicine. Basically what's happening is the pests that are attacking our crops become resistant to the active ingredients in the pesticides that are working on them, and the pesticides become redundant and obsolete. So the answer to this has always been, let's make a new pesticide with new active ingredient. But the problem is the pests by their nature are always in the lead in this evolutionary arms race. So it's going to pose huge problems down the line in that, like, how do we deal with this genetic resistance? Another problem is chemical pesticides are very harmful to life. You have to consider, one of the things we really found out as a group during the course of this project was that you can't treat a farm or you can't treat the soil or a garden just like an inert object. It's not just like an assembly line for food. A farm in its very nature is an ecosystem, and a garden is an ecosystem, and the soil is an ecosystem. Chemical pesticides have a huge detrimental effect on life in the soil, in microorganisms in the soil, and also their use on farms. When they get into waterways, they can kill a lot of biotic life in waterways. And as you can see from it's on this slide here, 98% of these pesticides don't actually reach their target species. So things that we saw, for example, were slug pellets. Slug pellets are like tiny little pellets. You spray them around, on your crops, and it's up to the slugs to go and eat them. They're quite similar to rat poison in that way, but 98% of the time they don't reach the target species. So what are they reaching? They're reaching other organisms in the soil. They can be taken up by livestock on farms. They can be taken up by your dog in your garden. These are hugely detrimental. Another problem here, health concerns within the human population. So I've touched on it there, it's really bad for livestock and stuff like that, but there's actually been research done to show a link between childhood leukemia, birth defects and neurodevelopmental disorders due to the use of chemical pesticides. Obviously, the idea of growing crops is to feed humans, feed animals, but we can't do this if it's going to pose a risk to human health. So what we looked at in our project was, what are the alternatives to chemical pesticides? What's a more sustainable way of delivering the same results without having the same harm to the environment? So I'm going to hand you over to Feargal now, and he's going to talk about biopesticides.
Okay, it's quite obvious that we need to use pesticides of some form. Without them, the percentage of crops lost would double. So I think we should really consider using, after what Cathal showed us, we should use biopesticides. Okay, so biopesticides are types of pesticides that are derived from natural materials such as plants, animals, and bacteria. They are generally less toxic and harm only one species, unlike regular pesticides, which often attack and kill organisms that they weren't intended to. They are generally used in much smaller amounts than chemical pesticides, and they decompose quickly, which leads them to causing far less pollution. Okay, this chap, Paul Stamets, he's an American mycologist, and he's an active researcher in the medicinal properties of mushrooms. And in 2001, he patented a biopesticide, which you use, and after a process called sporulation of a select I hate this word, entomopathogenic fungi, the area becomes no longer suitable for any insects. So it's far better than a regular pesticide. But big business in food don't particularly like this because they own patents on chemical pesticides, and they'll lose out on a lot of money. So they try and stop him. Okay, so we looked at the entomopathogenic. This word means the capability of causing disease in insects. So entomopathogenic mushrooms act as parasites to insects and kill them. These fungi usually attach themselves to the outside of an insect in the form of microscopic spores. These spores germinate and grow and eventually penetrate the insect's body and eventually kill it. So that's it.
So the name of our project, Sisyphus, is because it's not a world famous story, but Sisyphus also like created a city, and people were born from mushroom, just to make it. The target audience of our project are also family garden and farmers, both, and the question is how to get people conscious of using the biopesticide instead of chemical pesticides, and the question was show them how they can find the biological pesticide. So we wanted to create an interactive map, so farmers and also family gardeners can select the area where they're living, and so for example in Ireland, and they can see the pests they're facing in their special areas, and the website will show them what kind of biopesticide they can use to fight those pests instead of the chemical pesticides, and make being the middleman between those gardeners or farmers and the producers of the biologic pesticides.
Yes, so Manon talked about how do we get biopesticides, but what I sought to answer was what are biopesticides and why do we need them? So this is a game from Mola Industria. It's a website that uses games to convey political ideas. So in the same what, why fashion, this video game aims to say, what is McDonald's? McDonald's is a multinational corporation that sells fast food. And why should we stop using it? Which is it exploits low-wage workers. And I don't know if anyone can see on the bottom picture there to the right, there's an option to destroy rainforests. So then again, conveying why we shouldn't use them. So I became very interested in this idea, and I was kind of looking at a lot of game platforms you can do this on. And this first kind of template I have here are called clicker games. They're these addictive games that don't have any end. You see Cookie Clicker there. You just keep clicking away, and eventually you can employ grandmas and farms and get a time machine to get cookies in the past. So this is a very addictive game model, but I kind of tried to apply this to what our initial problem was, or our initial project was, which was mycorrhizal fungi. And mycorrhizal fungi is something that helps plants take up nutrients from the soil. So as you see there, in the same fashion, you just click on the website logo and the amount of hyphae goes up. but this isn't a very interesting concept. I don't really think anyone would play this. So we decided to kind of go on the more zombie, mummification, bio-pesticides idea that we've been seeing so much of. So as you can see here, this is a reformed version of it. I don't know if anyone had a go at it earlier. 2 kids were kind of dominating it for about half an hour. So we eventually ended up saying that while clicker games are great and addictive and very, very good at conveying, well, not very good at conveying ideas, we wanted something that was kind of a bit more complex, a bit more interactive. So we came up with this game called Pest Control. Pest Control is trying to appeal to farmers and gardeners by making it more local. If you can see those crops there, the lettuce and the roses or whatever, you can change those. They'll change on what region you've clicked into in the interactive map. So if you're in Cork, then sugar beet is going to be a massive thing. And the way this game works is it works on the basis of resources such as neighborhood approval, money, and time. And then you can see your options there. Nemeslug would be the bio-pesticide, while the other 2 pellets and spray would be your chemical pesticide. Now, how does this convey the idea of why chemical pesticides are bad and why we should use bio-pesticides? We'll get to after this slide. So this is just a very simple way of conveying or making it relevant to people. We put a gardener and a farmer in there to try and appeal to both demographics, and obviously the pests that are there, mollusks, larvae, and aphids, are the 3 biggest threats to cereal crops in Ireland, as said on Teagasc's website. So this, we felt, made it very local and relevant. And this is a small storyboard of the game. So if you see here in the bottom right of the storyboard, there's a chemical-free option where you've been using bio-pesticides. The dog can go around the garden eating slugs, no problem. If chemical pesticides are used, you'll have to go back to the kennel, and there's an option to get a vet trip, and unfortunately, if you ignore that, little Skippy won't be eating any more slugs. And then obviously there's an option with kids as well. With chemical use in the garden, the kids can become sick, have to go back inside, and ants doesn't really have anything to do with that, but it's a fun game mechanic. So, yeah, so what is the big limitation with Sisyphus? This is a rather generous illustration of me programming when I just about snap. We need a programmer to implement all these game ideas and these website ideas. It's very low cost in that regard. It only connects the middleman. It's a website orientated around raising awareness about biopesticides. So we think this is very feasible. Yes, so I'd like to thank all ITL Dub and Zachary for keeping me going on the programming when I was just about losing hope. And thanks very much for your attention.